In North Berwick, the seaside town to the east of Edinburgh, there is a fine old harbour, alongside of which is a building called the Old Granary. At the far end of the Old Granary is the Fisherman's Hall, where Benjy Pearson, the lobster fisherman, has his workshop.
Hi, I'm Ben Pearson, a local fisherman. Fished out in North Berwick for the last 50 years plus. Here we are in the fisherman's stores here, where we repair our gear and make new gear. Yeah, the family's fished out in North Berwick for generations. I think they can trace the family back about 300 years plus. It's worked here. Most of the family were born in this building. My granny was the last person to leave the building when it was condemned. And we are just carrying on the tradition as usual. There are not many of us left now. Well, we normally work from April to around about Christmas time, and then we just pack up, and that lets us get on with repairs and making new gear, you know. Most of my life, basically, since I left the school, that was in 62, 63, I think. Yeah, you start off making the base, and then we put the stones in them, and then we bow them and top stick them, and then we net them and net the eyes and ends, and basically your finished product, you know, as a traditional East Coast creel. My brother unfortunately died a couple of years ago. Yeah, he was fishing since we both of us left school. No, the family had a big boat. We used to work prawns, you know, 39, 40 feet. Well, my father and my brother and I worked on the same boat, in the family boat, like, you know. Yeah, well, we eventually just got our own boats, and I mean, he'd been working his own boat, now we'd work mine. Oh, you get different things, yeah. A variety of things, sea urchins, octopus, you know, starfish, I mean. Yeah, just throw them away. No, you get various things, you know, conger eels occasionally. There's various different fish, codlin, which they normally keep for fish cakes.
What's that?
I'd like to introduce myself. My name's John Miller. Must add it's spelt with an A. My family have been residents in North Berwick. In fact, we can trace our family tree back to the 1600s in North Berwick. You have a creel, Benjy, in front of you that you're making up. The wooden, as far as I can go back to my childhood, I've always remembered the wooden bases being the way it is at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically the same. But nowadays, I mean, we get all the wood cut at sawmills, where a way back we used to have to source our own wood and cut it by hand to the sizes. But it's a lot easier now.
Right, now the stone for weighing the creel down, that's obviously a fire brick from an old
nice
storage heater. What was used in the olden days?
Well, we used to go away along the coast to a place called Marine Villa, or Fisher Houses, the locals used to call it, and we used to gather flat stones off the beach. And basically they were used for to weight the creels down, and you had to tie them into the bottom. What I do now is nail them in with rope rather than lash them in with rope.
Right. Now can we move to the bows, as we would call them? It's all very well, nice and handy, this plastic water piping nowadays, but what was used in days gone by?
Well, at the spring of the year we used to go away up the hills into the woods and cut ash suckers. You gathered enough ash suckers at that time of the year because the sap was in them. You could bend them easily. So once you got them back to the harbour, you used to bend them into shape and put them in the fish boxes so that they kept their shape. And then you used your stocky bows through the year.
Can you tell me about your times you work? Obviously, the times when you're at sea depends on the tides.
Well, it's a tidal harbour and you've got to work round that. So, I mean, depending on the time of the year, I mean, you could be away some mornings, 3 o'clock in the morning, and work over low water and come back in late morning or early afternoon.
Yeah, and that's obviously dependent on the weather. And likes of today, when you're in making your creels, you presume you just work office hours.
Okay, naturally. Yeah, we're not allowed to make a noise in here before 9 o'clock, so we do work office 9 to 5. And that's us at the stage ready to put the net on.
Right, now move to this, the net, which is obviously a man-made fibre. What was used in olden days?
Well, it was marlin twine, I think we used to call it. But the lifespan of that, if you got maybe 3-4 months in the water, it used to just melt away.
So what did you use to try and prolong the life of the net itself?
Well, they used to have the old tar barrel outside there, and they used to dip all the creels in tar, and then they used to lift them out and let the tar dry, and that used to help preserve the net a wee bit. I mean, after being in the tar, you might have got 6 months, 8 months out of them.
What's the best month for catching lobsters, or months?
Well, the best time of the year for us is the middle of June right through to October. The end of October they start to tail off again, and the prices start to creep up. Then come, like say, Christmas and New Year time, that's when the prices peak. And that's where you may be paying about £20, £22 a kilo.
How much would you say it would cost, including your labour and parts, for one creel?
Well, I would think it would cost £40 to maybe 40 to 50, you know.
Right, £40-50, and going by the average price, you're looking at having to catch 6 or 7 lobsters per creel just to break even.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes it take you a wee while to recover that.
Yeah, and you could put your creels in the water one day and then get hit by a great storm. Then, yes, it must be kind of soul-destroying sometime.
Well, put it this way, you never actually get used to it. You think you would get used to it, but nah. No, it breaks your heart. That's it. The finished article.
During the season, Benjy takes his boat out 2 or 3 times a week. In preparation, he has to fill the fuel tanks and also take bait, which he gets from Musselburgh or Port Seton. His boat is berthed just inside the harbour, which makes it easy to get in and out, even when the tide level is fairly low. A friend of Benjy's, Raymond, often goes along to keep him company. Just now they're waiting for the tide to rise a bit higher. And now it's time to go. Lobster pots are attached to a line, and a line of lobster pots is called a fleet. Benjy has 13 pots in each fleet, and he generally has 5 fleets out at any one time, making 65 pots to deal with each outing. At each end of his fleets, he has red and white floats to distinguish his fleets from those of other fishermen. He begins by hauling in the floats, and then the pots, one by one. As each pot comes up, there is excitement. Is there anything in it? Often there is nothing there. Even so, the pot has to be cleaned out, fresh bait fixed on a hook, the string door tied up, and then the pot brought to the back of the boat. Perhaps there is a lobster in the pot, but it's too small. There are legal rules about the size of lobsters that can be kept. Benjy has a measure for checking. Lobsters that are too small must be thrown back. Is he tempted sometimes to keep ones that are nearly, but not quite large enough? At last it looks as though Benjy's luck is in.
Half a dozen like that, yeah.
When all the pots of a fleet have been dealt with, he settles down to fix elastic bands on the lobster's claws. Some days the catch is not so good. In this June outing, in the 13 pots of Benjy's first fleet, there were only 2 lobsters of legal size, and 1 or 2 crabs. He says it is because the lobsters have cast their shells and are not moving much until their new shells harden. However, in a later July outing, the catch is much better. There was a lobster of legal size in the very first pot pulled up, and 2 good-sized lobsters in quite a number of the pots that day. The lobsters have to be kept apart as they would attack each other. After putting elastic bands on the lobster claws, the fleet of lobster pots is relayed in a new area. To do this, Benjy has to stack the pots one by one on the side of his boat, whereas larger lobster boats have a vent at the back through which the pots are dragged out as the boat moves forward. Once the fleet is relayed in a new area, he moves on to the next of his fleets and begins the process again. It takes him about 3 hours to do all 65 pots. On the July trip, as Benjy's boat had finished the last pots and was heading home, a launch, the Marine Scotland Fishery Officer's launch, arrived to check the size of his catch. How glad he must have been that he hadn't kept any that were too small. Apparently the fine can be up to £2,000 for every undersized lobster. But Benjy's lobsters have all been approved. Today's catch has been a good one. Back in harbour, Benjy first deals with the crabs he has caught. Adding them to those in the storage cage until the restaurants want them. And then the lobsters. Apparently some have died. And he moves the rest to a more spacious cage. Adding today's catch to them.
And what do you see your future in the business? How many more years do you think you'll keep going? And what then after?
Well, as long as I've got my health, I'll keep carrying on. My father worked up to, he died and he was 84, he worked all his days. So if I've got my health, I'll just carry on. How old? Well, I'll be 67 this year.